Hi, Grandma here, and we are reading the the Iron Ring, and we're getting toward the end, and they have won the battle against Nahusha, and they are on their way to fulfill Tamar's quest, which is to go to Mahapura? Yeah, Mahapura. So they are on their way there. He has really pretty much the same group he's always had with him, going with him. Chapter 33, The Traveler. Next morning on the field at Ranapura, Tamar rode through the ranks of the Kshatriyas, honoring them, saying his thanks and farewells. At the end, he put his arms round Gayatri's neck, taking loving leave of her and Jagati, as Adikavi warned that the high passes would be too difficult and dangerous for the horses. Darshan promised to take the steeds with him. "They'll be fondly tended," the old warrior said. "They'll wait for you, lad, as I will." With a show of gruffness, he added, "Not happily or patiently." "You two wait for me," Hashkat told Akka. "If I wore sandals, you would put them on my throne, if I had a throne. In any case, keep an eye out on the Bandaloka while I'm tramping through the mountains." Who's tramping?" Garuda squawked. "Shma, what about me?" "Fly, you malingering bird, what else?" Hashkat retorted. "You and Akka did well enough going to Sundari." "Oh, yes, so I did," Garuda said sourly, "if you don't count being skewered with arrows and lurking in holes in the ground. But I'm not up to flying, let alone tramping." "Of course you're not," Mary said with a smile. "You'll stay with me until you get your strength back." "Faker," muttered Hashkat, while Garuda, cooing happily, flapped to Mary's shoulder. "Next he'll want his meals served on a platter." Kiran had generously outfitted them with warm cloaks, stout boots, as well as stores of food, tents, of course, canvas and other gear. Rajaswami insisted on carrying as much as his frail bones allowed. The others divided the burdens among themselves. By the time they reached the foothills overlooking Ranapura, Tamar realized why Adikavi had warned against taking the horses. There were no paths, and the rocky outcroppings were too treacherous for even the most sure-footed pack animals. "Something puzzles me," Tamar said as they gained the first heights. "How did Jaya travel to Sundari?" He pointed toward Kumuru and Sumuru. No signs of a road, no trail, no footpath, yet he had elephants, chariots, horses. "Schwa, don't ask me," Garuda said. "I don't recognize any of this. Perhaps I've forgotten, it was so long ago." "He might have taken a different path," Mary said. "There could be a dozen roads out of the valley for all you know, circling around in some other direction. If he ever came to Sundari in the first place, that's why you're here, isn't it, to find out?" Adikavi was calling them. The Sutta had picked a sheltered spot amid the wind-twisted trees and was lashing together the panels of the tent. Tamar glanced back a moment over the distance they had covered, the stretches of shale and gravel, the stunted vegetation. Black against the setting sun, the bare branches shuddered in the sharp breeze. He blinked and looked again. Far below, a dark shape skirted a ravine, then, within the instant, vanished amid the trees. Tamar shaded his eyes, waiting to see if the shadow would reappear. Nothing moved. He watched a little longer. It was, he decided, a trick of the light. He went to help pitch the tent and thought no more about it. 2 days later, he saw it again. They had been following the high ridges overlooking the Sabla. Tamar at first hoped to find easier ground along the river itself, but as Adhikavi pointed out, the walls of the gorge were too sheer, the iron-dark cliffs falling straight to the water's edge. The Sutta was confident they would soon reach the slopes leading into the valley, and so they pressed on, keeping the winding blue and white current always in sight. That afternoon, Adhikavi had chosen to halt in a rocky cavern where wind and weather had eaten away a domed chamber. In the middle, a pool of clear, drinkable water. They had begun hauling in their gear when Tamar again saw the dark figure appear and disappear behind a distant tumble of boulders. This time he was sure it was no trick of the light. This time he was sure it was a man. He called Mary and the others and pointed to where he had glimpsed the figure. By then it was gone. Even the sharp-eyed Adhikavi could make out no sign of it. "You're sure it wasn't a mountain creature of some sort?" Mary said. "A stray animal? Too bad you didn't have a better look." "What creature would be fool enough to roam around in this desolation?" said Hashcat. "Not one of the Mandaloka, I can tell you." "As long as whoever or whatever it is keeps a polite distance," put in Rajaswami, "I shouldn't be too concerned. He'll go on his way, we'll go on ours." Tamar was not satisfied. "If he's following us, I want to know why. Stay in the cave, all of you. I'll go and find out." "It'll be dark before you get back," Mary reminded him. She turned to Garuda perched on a pile of gear. "Can you fly there and see? It's no distance for an eagle. You'll take a quick glance around and be here again in time for your food." Garuda grumbled and muttered, but finally, with a toss of his beak, he flew where Tamar pointed. While Tamar and Mary hauled gear and provisions into the cave, Rajaswami bustled about, laying blankets and lighting lamps. Hashkat and Adhikavi had set off to find dry twigs and a bit of moss for a cook fire. By the time the monkey and the Sutta were back, the shadows had deepened and pellets of snow whirled over the ridges. Tamar paced uneasily. Garuda had been gone overlong. Mary, too, was anxious. They were ready to throw on their cloaks and search for the bird when he swooped into the cave. I saw! Garuda crowed. His feathers were crusted with sleet. An icicle hung from the tip of his beak, but he squawked jubilantly as he landed on the earthen floor. "It was marvelous!" "I knew you'd find out," Mary tried to calm the excited bird who was clucking with gleeful self-satisfaction. "Tell us." "Shma, wonderful! I flew like an eagle!" Garuda cackled proudly. "Soaring, diving!" "Leave off, you puffed-up chicken," Hashcat cried. "What did you see? A man? An animal?" Tamar knelt beside Garuda. "Did you have a clear look?" That." Garuda shrugged his wings. "No, not a trace of anything at all. A waste of my valuable time. I gave up searching. But then, since I was already in the air, I thought, why not fly just a little bit further down the valley? And there it was, Mahapura. Just as I remembered, or I'm starting to remember. Beautiful. The tall towers, the 8 gates. We're nearly there. I'll finish my errand after all this time. Oh, I hope King Jaya forgives me for taking so long, but I didn't fail him. I'll put the ruby in his hand." Garuda broke off and cast a beady eye on Tamar. "The ruby, you've got it safely put away, don't you?" "Yes? Well, let me see it," he went on as Tamar took the gem from beneath his garments and held it in front of the bird. "You'll still carry it the rest of the way for me? We've come this far. I'm taking no chances on dropping it again. I just want to look and admire." "Gloat is what you mean," said Hashcat as Tamar set down the ruby. "Call it what you please." Garuda squatted on top of the stone as if you were about to hatch it like an egg. The gem's been tossed around enough. I want it to be with me a little while. I find it very comforting. Do you mind? Enjoy yourself, said Mary, while Garuda crooned and rocked back and forth. Sit on it as long as you want. You have a right to be pleased. So there truly is a palace, Tamar began. Truly a King Jaya. A heavy-set figure was standing in the mouth of the cave. Tamar got hastily to his feet. The man was wrapped in a cloak of animal skins. A fur cap pressed over a hedge of black hair. Frozen droplets glittered in his beard. Snow crusted his heavy boots. No harm, he called out, holding up his hands as Tamar reached for his sword. I only beg a little warmth, a mouthful of food if you can spare it. My name's Griva. I saw you before, Tamar looked closely at him, in the ravine. Then, by the mound of boulders. Why are you following us? Oh, am I? Griva stepped all the way into the cave. He seemed to bring the night chill with him. Following you? We only happened to find ourselves on the same path. And what path is that? I might ask you likewise, but your business is your own, and no concern of mine unless you have an interest in common. And that would be, said Mary. Griva's eyes darted around the cave. His weather-blackened face folded into a grin. Stones, he said. Wonder what stone he's talking about. Well, chapter 34 is called the Fire Flower, so I think I know what stone he's talking about. That's right, stones, bright, shiny ones, gems, eh? You found a few yourself, I'd not be surprised. He stamped the snow off his boots and started toward the cook fire. Tamar put out an arm to hold him back, but Griva shouldered past, skirted the pool, and hunkered down by the flames. These mountains are full of them. They hide in all manner of nooks and crannies. Sometimes, he added with a wink, when you'd never think of looking. But I sniff them out and pry them loose. That's not our business, Tamar drew his sword. If it's yours, go on about it. Griva eyed the blade and gave a throaty laugh. Now, no need to get the wind up. I'm no robber, if that's what you fear. Food and drink's all I ask. A little corner to sleep in. You'll not deny me that much, will you? He has a point, my boy, Rajaswami whispered. Hospitality and courtesy. You can't turn him away. Griva, meantime, had attacked the food that Mary handed him, grinding it in his heavy jaws and wiping his mouth on the back of a hairy hand. He squinted an eye at Tamar. I'll not intrude on your snug little corner here, he said, settling himself. I'm not one to stay where I'm not welcome. Oh, yes, you're thinking you'll be glad to see the back of me. Who could blame you? A stranger out of nowhere. You'd not expect to have dealings with a rough and ready fellow like me. But don't be too quick to send me away, Griva added. There could be a nice, tidy profit for both of us. We're not looking for profit, Mary said. What if it jumped out at you? Griva reached under his cloak, pulled out a leather pouch. He untied it and spilled the contents into his palm, a heap of gems. Little twinklers, eh? Griva licked his lips. Beauties, you'd almost want to eat them. I have more, besides, plenty for all of you. Why show us these? Tamar demanded. Whispers. I've heard a few. A word here, a word there. Nothing that means anything by itself. Put them together, you have an interesting tale. How a young lad, very much like yourself, got his hands on something. And what would that be? A stone. A shiny little red stone. Do you follow me so far? Tamar did not answer. Griva went on in an amiable tone. For the sake of the tale, let's call that little stone a ruby. Now, let's suppose there's a rich man, a gem fancier, a collector, as you might say. He wants a stone like that, not for its value. It's half the size of the ones I've got right here. No, it's just a curio, an odd sort of trinket. But he's made up his mind. You know how these collectors are. So he sends a fellow with an eye for such things, a fellow like me, if you will, to track it down and buy it for him at a good price. That's understood. There's a happy ending to the tale, continued Griva. The young lad, delighted at the chance to reap a fortune, he trades that little ruby he's carrying for, say, a fistful of diamonds. So everybody's overjoyed with the bargain. They go their ways, simple as that. A pleasant story, don't you agree? What do you think? I think it would be a bad idea, because Tamar would be going back on his promise to Garuda and Jaya. It's Jaya's ruby, so I don't think Tamar is going to fall for it. Tamar tightened his grip on the sword. I don't know who you are or who you serve, and I don't care. Get out. Griva shrugged, poured the gems back into the pouch. There's yet another ending to the story, and not such a happy one. The young man and his friends are suddenly dead. Griva leaped to his feet. Quick as an eye blink, he wrenched away Tamar's blade and broke it over his knee. No more tales, King of Sundari. He gripped Tamar by the front of the jacket and pulled him close until their faces nearly touched. Griva hissed and bared his teeth. Play no games with me. I know you've got the ruby. I'll have it now. Adhikabi had sprung up to grapple him from behind, but Griva shook him off and sent him sprawling. Give, I'll tear you apart and all the rest. Look at me. See who you're dealing with. Griva's face blurred and shifted before Tamar's eyes. The teeth lengthened into fangs. The body swelled and burst from the garments. The fingers clutching Tamar's jacket turned to claws. He's a shapeshifter. Rakshasa! The Sutta flung himself again on the demon's back and seized him by the hair, holding on with all his strength. And that Rakshasa is an evil, shape-shifting demon. Garuda, take the ruby, Miri shouted. Fly, fly to Jaya. Seeing the bird snatch the gem from under its feathers, the Rakshasa tossed Tamar aside and lunged for Garuda. Wings beating, the eagle streaked from the cave. Hashkat darted across the ground and wrapped his arms around the demon's legs. Miri threw herself on the struggling Rakshasa. Rajaswami picked up a burning branch from the cook fire and shook it at Griva with all the ferocity he could manage. Growling, the Rakshasa seized the branch in his jaws, snapped it into bits, and spat them blazing at Rajaswami. Griva heaved himself closer to the mouth of the cave. Hold fast! Tamar understood that Griva was not so much trying to escape his attackers as he was seeking a different victim. He's after Garuda. Let him go, Rajaswami called. He can't catch an eagle. Well, what do you think? Do you think the evil spirit can catch Garuda? If he's a shapeshifter, I think he probably can. Tamar was about to follow Acharya's urging. It crossed his mind that Garuda was already aloft and safely in flight to Mahapura. But even as he watched, the Rakshasa hunched up his shoulders and spread out his arms. They shuddered for a moment, then turned into powerful wings. Glossy feathers like iron scales covered the demon's body. The legs with their talons had become those of a hideous bird of prey. Hashkat screamed. The hooked beak, now jutting from what had been the Rakshasa's face, ripped into the monkey's arm. Bleeding, Hashkat still clung to the raging bird, but the creature flung him to the ground. Adhikavi, shaken loose, tumbled backward. As Miri kicked and pummeled the Rakshasa, Tamar sprang past the buffeting wings, leaped onto the demon's back, and locked his hands around the neck. The Rakshasa doubled its efforts to gain the mouth of the cave. Tamar felt his fingers slip as the huge bird twisted its neck around, trying to savage him with its beak. Doesn't sound good. The same moment, wings flapping, screeching at the top of his voice, Garuda streaked back into the chamber. "No! Get out!" Miri ordered. "Do as I told you. Save your ruby. Save yourself." The Rakshasa whirled to fend off Garuda's attack. Tamar's grip at last gave way. He fell and skidded across the cavern floor. Garuda swooped and circled, striking out with his beak and talons. Wind whistled as the Rakshasa's wings unfolded to their full breadth, beating Garuda to the ground. The Rakshasa sprang into the air, ready to plummet onto the stunned eagle. In the pool, the water roiled and churned into foam. A long shape burst up, scales glistening. The great serpent flung itself at Rakshasa. "Shisha!" Tamar cried. The Naga prince had lunged to grip the Rakshasa in his coils. The demon bird flailed its wings, fighting to break free of Shisha's encircling body. The Naga tightened his hold and bore the creature to earth. The Rakshasa shrieked in fury. Its feathers began glowing red hot. A tongue of flame shot from its beak. Shisha writhed closer to the edge of the pool, and then, with the Rakshasa locked in his grasp, rolled into the water and vanished in its depth. The surface of the pool hissed as if a flaming torch had been quenched. Tamar ran to the edge. He could see nothing of the Naga prince. The water was calm again. Miri and Adhikavi drew him away. "We were enemies, Shisha and I," Tamar murmured. "We fought once. He would have drowned me. Yet he came." "Yes, King of Sundari, so I did." Shisha's head rose from the water. "For the sake of the mercy you showed me." The Naga prince slithered all the length from the pool. "The Rakshasa is destroyed, as he would have destroyed you. His powers were great. Only a Naga could have stood against him." "But you, Prince Shisha, how have you come here?" Tamar pressed his palms together and bowed his head in gratitude. "We owe you our lives. You followed us. Why?" "We feared for you," answered the Naga. "Some while after you departed our realm, we had word of a Rakshasa seeking your trail. We could only guess that it had to do with the ruby you chose from our treasure, and that the gem was even greater value than we had supposed. For a time, I lost track of you and knew only that you wished to go to Mahapura. I could reach you no sooner. The Naga kingdom runs through all waterways and secret springs, but none of us dared to venture this far." Miri had gone to cradle the motionless Garuda in her arms. Shisha lifted his head, crowned by the glittering sapphire, and cast unblinking eyes around the cave. "The thieving monkey is still with you?" Shisha darted out his forked tongue. "I expected that wretch would have long since deserted you." "He became a brave friend," Tamar said, "and a worthy king of his people." "And badly hurt," put in Adhikavi, leaving Hashkat's side. A Rakshasa's bite is venomous. He laid a hand on Tamar's arm. Come to him. I fear he's dying. Well, that would be sad. Hashkat has really been a very important part of their troop. Well, that's the end of chapter 34. We only have 2 more chapters to go. The Palace of Illusions and Jaya. Okay, bye-bye.